Hey everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of ESLA's Icons and Experts, brought to you by ESLA, the Extended Stay Lodging Association. Learn more about this great nonprofit trade association that helps you get success in extended stay over at esla.org. That's esla.org. Now here on Icons and Experts, every other week we're highlighting a person who's either had unmistakable impact on the extended stay or learning the tools of the trade that you need to be successful. This week, we've got Glenn McFarland, who was in hospitality's extended stay so early, it's ridiculous. In fact, he loved it so much, he now is working with Choice Hotels, helping with extended stay brands. Speaking of Choice Hotels, the show is brought to you by Choice Hotels, the leader in extended stay with about 500 hotels open in the extended stay market, with another 300 under development under 4 brands, including the 3-time J.D. Power Award winning WoodSpring Suites and their newest brand, Everhome Suites. I've been at one of them. They are absolutely fantastic. They have a proven track record of success and provide their franchisees with unrivaled operational know-how, which you need to be successful, and have a dedicated team of 70 extended stay experts that work from site selection, sales, marketing, and operations. Check that out. Choice Hotels Development. That's choicehotelsdevelopment.com. So today, I'm joined by Matt McElhare, also of Choice Hotels, and Glenn McFarland, and we're going to talk about the importance of understanding the extended stay segments with a lot of insights from founding father Jack DeBoer. And the differences, we're going to learn the differences between transient and extended stay hotels, unique operational challenges, the significance of maintaining operational discipline and avoiding unnecessary costs, plus real-life examples about how extended stay hotels are making differences in guests' lives, as well as the importance of professional management companies, strategies for investors to find success, and understand what guests truly need as opposed to what they truly want. Also, this episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Dellisart Hospitality, the leader in third-party management of extended stay hotels. They've got more than 22 years experience in this, and they're the only hospitality company offering 3 key services, whether together or separate: full management, remote sales support, remote revenue management services, and more. Check them out, Dellisart.com, Dellisart.com. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the show. Hey guys, great to see you. I've got 2 great guests with us today. Number one, our guest, and I'm talking about Glenn McFarland, this guy right here below me, VP with Choice Hotels Extended Stay brand, and my co-host for today over there, Matt McElhare, VP and segment lead Extended Stay Hotels at Choice Hotels International. Guys, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about extended stay today. But before we get to our guest, Glenn, Matt, thanks for joining me as a co-host today. And I love that you and I are both working with the Extended Stay Lodging Association. Pretty awesome.
Excited to be here. This series is great. I think we've got such a good balance of guests with different perspectives. It's going to be a useful tool for folks, whether they're new to extended stay or they're looking to expand with their extended stay portfolio, which seems to be a commonality amongst hotel developers these days. So excited for the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Especially, I just found out Glenn down here was the 4th ever licensee with Value Place, one of the early major brands in extended stay. You all might know by the name of WoodSpring. So, Glenn, you're the guy who liked it so much, you actually pursued it as your entire career over there. But I want to go back, because what we talk about here, Glenn, is all roads and extended stay lead back to the godfather of it all, Jack DeBoer. How do you know him, and how did he get you excited about being in this business as an investor, owner, and operator?
So, Glenn, it's good to be with you guys today. Thank you for inviting me. I got affiliated with Jack DeBoer back in 2004, actually. As you mentioned, a member of what was then known as the Bell Group. We jumped in a big way with Value Place. Don Bell, our principal partner, actually loaned Jack the money for the first 2 Value Places in Wichita, Kansas. And Jack brought myself and a couple of other partners into this deal. So we jumped in a big way starting in November of 2004. And I mean, it was evident from the moment that I met Jack how enthusiastic he was about this space, his history with the space, and obviously the opportunity for returns on investment were a big part of what we did.
Yeah. So a question for you is Value Place now, Woodspring is obviously in the economy part of it. What appealed to you about extended stay in the economy sector?
Glenn, that's a great question too, because Jack's philosophy was you either want to be at the top end or the bottom end. Obviously, he started Residence Inn, and then Value Place was his latest creation at the time, having done Candlewood in between. But he really felt like the economy sector was a growing phase because we met America right where they needed us to be. In that economy space, a lot of times people don't have a choice on extended housing, if you will, or virtual housing. And he really felt like that was an area that was underserved and unmet demand, in terms of that. And so that's why we jumped into it, got excited about it. And it was literally from day one, we started to see, man, this can make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah. Had you had much experience in investing in hotels prior to that?
Actually, no. As a member of the team, one
Yeah.
of my partners and I had done some senior living investing, and from an investment just return, we weren't operators, but we had done some investing. And so then when we jumped onto Don's group, that's really
Yeah.
where we got involved and started going in a much heavier way.
Yeah, Matt, I said that very specifically because I had a feeling that was going to be his answer. One of the cool things I loved about Value Place in particular, one of the reasons why I probably appealed to Choice Hotels is you're bringing a lot new types of owners to the market, folks that had had experience in other sectors but had never considered hospitality before. Matt, what do you think made uh, Value Place now Woodspring so attractive to Choice Hotels?
So, I mean, I think, and Glenn could speak to this as well, but having investors come in without a preconceived notion on what a hotel investment should look like, how it should be operated, that culture that they created with this being different, right? Glenn, the first thing you mentioned, Glenn McFarland, was about how this is kind of a quasi-hybrid asset between a multifamily and a hotel. I think the initial investors into Value Place bought into that concept, and that discipline to this being a different type of model permeated through everything they did and created a culture that stayed with Value Place and then Woodspring. And that has now, we've brought it through with Choice and used it to launch our brands, or relaunch them in the case of Mainstay and Suburban. And so I think you have to lean into the differences. And I think it's a great segue because, obviously the segment is hot and you've got a lot of traditional hotel investors that want to get into this space. And so, Glenn, from your perspective at Glenn McFarland, when you're working with someone who's new to the space, or they see the returns, they see the reports from Highland Group, what are the biggest mistakes that you see, or some of the preconceived notions that you need to kind of get in front of so that some of these new investors can be successful in the space?
Matt, I think that really boils down to there's two different types of investors, just two big types of investors. Those that are looking to get into the hospitality space and those that are already in the hospitality space. So I'll divide it there. Those that are already in it, the transient owners and operators, if you will, one of the biggest mistakes that they make is coming in with that bias. And they really have to almost unlearn what they've learned in the transient space because this is so different. You're looking for really a guest that is going to stay not a night or 2 nights and get a high churn and have to do housekeeping and the other assignments that you have to do when you're dealing with a transient guest. But you really got to think ahead, and you really want to go after that ESOC business, that extended stay occupancy business, the guy or gal that's going to be in this hotel for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks plus. And when you do that, you have to think differently than a typical transient hotel because it all starts there. How do we attract? How do we grab? And how do we maintain that guest? When you're bringing somebody in from outside the industry, you're really teaching them from a square one on what is hospitality. And you have to break away from their pre-notions on this as well, because they're coming in not understanding what extended stay really is. And so they're learning it from a grassroots level. And so it's really exciting to teach them the things that they need to know about it and start from square one. That's why, Matt, I'll just take a segue for just a second. That's why many of our new investors coming in, we strongly recommend the use of a professional management company that has extended stay experience, because they're already there, and it allows that new investor to come in and invest on the assets and leave the operations to an experienced professional.
Yeah, you are speaking my language, Matt.
No, I think that's spot on, Glenn. And I think management company element is that the numbers obviously pencil when folks do that and they look at those options. But thinking back, just to go back to the early days, the Bell Group days, Glenn, how much of what Jack instilled in those initial management companies carries forward today to today? And I'm just interested that, Jack is a very quotable guy. And so I'm just curious, what are the few quotes or things that Jack had shared with you in those early days when you were learning the business that you still carry forward today and share with new owners in the space?
So Jack was a great visionary, is what I would say. And so he did have what I use as a term, notable quotables. And two of those that I remember specifically that I'll call out is treat nickels like manhole covers. Ultimately, what he was talking about is be very disciplined on the expense side of the balance sheet, and making sure that everything that you do, if you're going to be an economy, be disciplined in the economy sector, and make sure that you're really keeping a tight control over the staffing model, which is what makes economy extended stay different than many of the other extended stays that we know of across the market today. The other thing that Jack said, that really honed in for me, is that you really need to focus on being disciplined in this process. And Jack was adamant about keeping it clean, keeping it safe, and keeping it simple. And those three things were his mantra in economy: clean, safe, and simple. And if you do those things right, you have a better than average shot of making these things successful, as is proven out through the 20 years that this brand has been in play. Meaning,
Right. And when you say simple, I know that you mean operationally, and that means sticking to that plan, because we can't underscore that enough. Next, in our next episode, we're actually going to be featuring industry icon Paul Novak, and I had the opportunity to interview him last week on stage at the Southern Lodging Summit. Thanks everybody down there for a great event. And he was saying that the biggest Achilles heel of this business are a transient mindset with an extended stay product. So we'll probably talk about that more in the next show. It's just really important that we underscore that. But Glenn, I'm curious, man, you liked it so much, you got involved in the business itself. So when you're working with Jack and you watch the company grow and you watch the company build, what kind of opportunities did you see going forward, and how are they panning out to your early assessments?
Well, it's interesting, Glenn. I guess the thing that really, obviously, the potential, the investment, the returns were a big part of jumping into this. But where it really got solidified in my mind was we had just opened up. We opened up the 7th value place when we entered the system. That was in September 2005. And literally within a 3-week period, we opened 3 new value places in Kansas City, Omaha, and Lincoln, Nebraska. And I remember we opened the Kansas City location 2 weeks later to the day. This lady that I had literally helped check in on day 1 that we were open was now checking out. And this lady had come in with a number of personal belongings. Her minivan, as I recall, was almost full to the brim. And so when I went up to her and I asked her, "How was your stay?" Because I had met her 2 weeks before and I just happened to be back at the hotel, she literally started to cry. Well, as a hotel, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, what has happened here? What went wrong?" And I remember specifically that she looked at me and she saw my name tag on, I had it on, and she said, "Glenn, I remember you checking me in. And the day that I checked in, I had just been evicted out of my townhome because they had to condemn it. And as I looked around for a place to stay, I had the opportunity of Value Place, a woman's shelter, or a flea dive hotel that really wasn't safe for me. And she said, after 2 weeks here, I can tell you that Value Place was a godsend to me. She was literally tearing up. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? She said, the people treated me with respect. I was able to save money while I was here. It was clean. It was affordable for me. And now I can move out into a new place. But I will never forget what Value Place did for me. And so I've carried that down through these 20 years. And as I get a chance to talk to our general managers across the entire system now, I always relate back to that story, meaning get to know your guest. And when you're in the economy extended stay space, that's really an opportunity for us, for that general manager's 18 inches across the desk from that guest that's coming in. And if we do that and take care of those guests, it's amazing the number of referrals we'll get and how we keep our guests satisfied.
Fantastic. So let me ask you this. You are making a difference in people's lives every day when you operate one of these hotels. When you were with Jack back in the day, did he have any stories about that human connection and how vital a part of the community these hotels became?
They really do become a part of the community. And Glenn, one of the things that early on we adopted was getting in touch with folks from City Hall, people from the police department, people from the fire department. We actually invite them to come into the hotel during its pre-opening process, and once they do open, so that they can get familiar with it. We've actually had fire departments come in before we open and walk the building and even do some training within our building of their people. So we really try to integrate ourselves into the local community and encourage that for our owners and operators where possible, because the referrals, a lot of what happens in the economy extended stay space, it happens because of the local driven business that's happening, the referral business locally.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, Glenn, or G, I think the biggest thing, we're in the early innings of the extended stay story, as I know both of you all know. That type of mentality and that staying very disciplined to being different, but also doing it the right way, and really adding value to the communities, that's going to allow this segment to reach its full potential.
Yep.
And as we work with our partners, and really in my role on ESLA, as we create a community for extended stay to propel the segment forward, that's got to be a key piece of everything we do, which is remember who you're serving, which is someone that could be, in between homes, on the road, constantly trying to, build a better life. And I think these hotels provide them with an affordable, better option than a hotel for that long length of stay. And I think we'll reach the potential if every person that's building these hotels is buying into that, and the brands hold those owners accountable for a high level of quality. And so I think what Glenn shared, that's why Value Place and Woodspring was able to, get into any market and be at 80% occupancy within the first few weeks, where there's such a need and the product and the service was there to match it. And I think that's something that this industry needs to carry forward, for years to come. I think that was really well said, Glenn.
Absolutely. Glenn, now one of the parts of of every incredible segment in our business is they tend to become segmented. And that's kind of what's happening right now in extended stay. You find folks over at Choice Hotels already have Everhome Suites, Woodspring Suites, Stay Suites, Suburban Studios. So how should potential investors think about what type of product that they should invest in? Is it economy? Is it more of an upscale product? What are you thinking, and how would you advise people?
Again, I'll kind of go back to the guy that brought me into the business and the mentor and the visionary in this business. Jack had a philosophy that you either want to be on the top end or you want to be on the economy end, because
I'd like to just throw in there created Residence Inn, created Value Place as an example. Please continue.
Exactly. And his philosophy was, if you're in the middle, you kind of get squeezed a little bit, because you got to be very, very disciplined in terms of adding cost. Jack used to say this as well. This is another notable quotable: pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. And so if you are, what he meant by that is, if you stay disciplined in the segment that you are in, find your niche and be very, very disciplined about that process in terms of adding cost to your box. One of the things, Glenn, that happens with a traditional hotelier that comes into this space and they're going to build a new WoodSpring or a new Everhome, they want to take that prototype and they want to personalize it. And if they bring in an outside architect, that architect a lot of times will want to build a monument to himself or herself. So what we really encourage is that discipline of, if you're going to do it, be fed by using the prototype, because the prototype has evolved through the years and was developed for maximum return on the investment. And that's really a key in this area.
So, Matt, how do you help people determine then maybe which category they should go in? Because there are probably markets where it makes more sense to go with a higher end product than an economy product, right?
Yeah, I think especially now, I mean, you've seen cost of capital, cost to build go up pretty significantly, and the cost of land, especially in some of the higher RevPAR markets, they necessitate a product that can push ADR and get to a higher rate while still operating with the same fundamentals that Glenn just talked about. That's where we really see Everhome fitting in, and I think that's why you've seen a lot of new brands introduced that are, call it, more lower mid-scale or core mid-scale. Most of the supply growth in mid-scale has been Home2s and Town Places, which are great products, but they're positioned well above, this space where you're actually going to drive a significant number of your room nights from guests that are staying for weeks or multiple weeks. Cities ask for product in some cases that's a little higher end, fit finish. It fits within the community. So there's a space for that mid-scale product to play as well. But what I always go back to is, you've got such an enormous supply-demand imbalance between extended stay room night demand and existing installed extended stay supply. And most of the macro trends from an economic standpoint suggest that demand pie is going to continue to grow, and it's going to grow with different types of demographics. So I see there's opportunity across the spectrum, and it's not a zero-sum game. And so to me, if I'm a builder, I'm just looking at, I need extended stay in a lot of these markets. The brands have tools. We have a tool called Choice Maps that allows them to sort of vet different options and vet sites. And then you get that thing built and you operate it with discipline, and you're pretty well set up for success. So that's my perspective on it. Yeah.
I think that's really that's a really interesting point, and it's really important to get set up for success. So, Glenn, when you're looking to get set up success outside treating it like a transient property, what are some of the biggest mistakes that people don't realize that they're going to make and then go, oh, when it's too late?
Well, I think one of those mistakes, Glenn, is when they come into the sector, they have a preconceived notion, whether they're coming from inside the industry or outside the industry. And the biggest mistake that we see a lot of times is they say, I can do that. I've had experience in this, I've had experience in that, and I can come in and do that. Back to that, how hard could it be to run an economy extended stay hotel? But it really is a very, very tough business. And what I mean by tough is, it takes that discipline to say, we're not going to let staffing get out of hand. We're only going to provide limited service to these guests. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive those returns, because a lot of times they'll say, man, we can put that little bit of extra artwork in the building, or we can do this little extra flair to the building itself. And Jack used to always ask the question. I know I keep going back to Jack, but
because it always goes back to Jack. That's why
it rings true. Is he used to say, be careful of putting your personal biases into these buildings, because the economy guests thinks differently than we as investors. Where we stay and the amenities that we look for in a hotel as we travel with our family, friends, whatever, are different than what that economy guest and even the mid-scale guest is really looking for. And so you have to tailor the product to that guest, but keeping that discipline on the operating model. And many times the mistakes they make is they think they know, but they really need to learn it. And
Yeah.
that's a
Big
key.
takeaway from that one is give guests what they need, not what you think they want. And I see this with a lot of brands out there, hotels and outside. They ask customers what they want, and customers will tell you what they want. None of them are really what they're actually how they're actually going to use it or what's really important to them. So you always got to boil things down to the basics, particularly with this extended stay market. Great point, Matt.
Yeah. So Glenn, you've talked about the way an owner needs to approach this asset and how it's very different than the typical transient. How does that affect the type of staffing and the ideal GM in this type of model? Think mid-scale and below. What are your thoughts on sort of what that at GM looks like, how that differs from how someone might think about the GM's responsibilities in a typical mid-scale hotel?
Yeah, like compared to a comfort or something like that.
Yeah, when you look at it, I think, Matt, the issue with general managers in our segment, whether that is with WoodSpring or Everhome Mainstay, the thing that's going to make extended stay successful is really keeping a tight control over the staffing model. And if that general manager comes in from a transient hotel that's in the mid-scale or whatever, where they've had this big staff because they run 150 room of limited service and they're doing breakfast and they've got a staff of 15, 20 people or more, that type of general manager doesn't necessarily translate really well into an extended stay, a very disciplined extended stay model, because they're used to having staff and they're performing a lot of administrative functions and they're managing a bigger staff. When you get into this space, the secret, as I mentioned before, is controlling those costs, and the biggest cost variable is staffing. And so when you do that, you need a general manager that's going to come in and understands the importance of being a player coach, not just a coach. And what I mean by that is there are times that they're going to need to go out there and they're going to need to clean rooms because the staff hadn't showed up for, because they couldn't get a ride to work or they had a family crisis come up and you got rooms to clean and you need to take care of the guest. You may need to grab a housekeeping cart. You may need to go grab a caulking gun or a paintbrush and go get a room or 2 or 3 ready to rent. That happens in mid-scale and in economy space. So that is the key of making sure that you find the right person. So we've had people come in from convenience store backgrounds, restaurant backgrounds, people that are used to being hands-on with how they approach it. We've obviously had people come over from hospitality backgrounds as well, but typically it's that hungry wolf, the people that have been a night auditor or an AGM that haven't really reached that GM level. Not that a GM can't transition, but a lot of times you really get that hungry wolf hunting best. They come in and they really want to learn it, grow it, and they'll apply themselves across the spectrum.
Could you utilize one general manager for an extended stay hotel amongst several properties that are clustered in the same region, for example, or in the same neighborhood?
Glenn, we really don't recommend that because one of the keys to being a general manager in this space, whether it's economy or mid-scale, you have to get to know your guest. And if that manager is trying to pop from this hotel to that hotel and oversee all of those, they lose focus on one of the primary differentiators, and that is get to know the guest and make sure that we're meeting that guest's needs. And if that guest's need, and if you're popping around, we really look at that. That's where the regional manager, district manager, as they're called, come into play of overseeing that staff. But you got to have a really dedicated person. In my opinion, that's what has worked best down through the decades.
Excellent. Matt, you got anything else for our great guest here?
I mean, I think we've covered so much, and thank you so much. But I guess here, just to kind of put a bow on it. So I'm someone come in, I've never done an extended stay before. What are the 3 things that I need to make sure I do if I want to be successful?
So Matt, I think the first thing is obviously know your franchisor, get to know them and what's the experience that they have in the space to teach me how to be successful. I went to an IFA, International Franchising Association conference years ago, and I remember they had a panel of sports figures up on the stage. And they interviewed a gentleman, I can't remember his name right now, but he had been with the New England Patriots as an offensive lineman. And they were asking these sports figures, how do you pick a franchise if you're going to make some investments? And this guy said, in the particular franchise business that he was in, he went into the restaurant business. He said, I actually interviewed them and I said, who can give me the playbook? Just like Bill Belichick gave me a playbook and followed the playbook to win Super Bowls, I needed a playbook that would help me be successful in the restaurant business. And he found that in his franchise, in the franchisor that he selected. That's an important component of, I think, when you determine a franchisor, make sure you know what their playbook looks like and that you can follow that. Number two, as I would mention again, if you don't have specific experience in this space, make sure that and even if you do, consider taking a professional property management company on that has experience, because they know the space, they've dealt with the space, they won in the space, and they can continue to be successful in the space. So that's number two. And I think number three is, again, don't allow your personal biases to affect what you're doing. Follow the playbook, ask for assistance. And my team, I have 6 people on my team, Matt, as you know. We have 150 cumulative years of extended stay experience. If you can draw on that, we can help you be successful.
Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for being such a great co-host. I appreciate you guys. And listen, this is normally a part of the podcast where I wrap everything up, but Glenn Prime over there was the one who pretty much nailed everything. So all I'm going to have to say right now is make sure you check our database of experts and icon shows brought to you by ESLA. You can find them at esla.org and at novacancynews.com. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. We'll see you next time. Have a great one.